The ideal candidate that stands to benefit from C15 supplementation? Somebody who's lactose intolerant, vegan.
Yeah, there's who's most likely to be deficient. Those people are likely to report benefits. There's actually a C15. C15 has always been able to be tested through fatty acid panels, as long as your doctor's using a panel that includes C15, right, and doesn't use it as a reference. And then we also worked with Genova Diagnostics to develop an at-home C15 test, just because it's like, if we're saying you need to increase your C15 levels, great stuff. Am I? And where am I at? And so we worked with Genova Diagnostics. So if people wanted to do that, they could test their C15 levels and see where they're at. The other group of people that we see that are fanatics, so we kind of have three groups: the ones that are deficient, the ones that are pretty healthy, but I wouldn't say they eat a lot of dairy. They probably are picking oat milks, but they're not dairy free. Those are the ones that are in their 30s and they see the benefits of calmer mood and better sleep. And it's changing their life. So that's the second group. And then the third group is my favorite because I'm there because I'm 52. So our older customers, and oh my gosh, Max, like these are hardcore Fatty 15 fans where if you take away their Fatty 15, I don't know, they might cut my hand off or something. They're like, I have my life back. My knees aren't hurting. I'm back to playing golf again. I'm not napping for 3 hours during the day because I'm sleeping well at night. I have my energy back. And it's just the testimonials and the stories we hear back from our oldest folks. Because again, if it's helping to strengthen our cells, and I know we have to be careful about phrases like reversing aging, but reversing cellular aging is what it does. 6 hallmarks of aging. Now we're up to 6 hallmarks of aging that it is reversing aging in these folks, and they are feeling it the most. Wow. And so that's been, if we chose who's going to benefit the most, probably the youngest people, because they don't want a lifetime of deficiency riding on them. Who loves it the most?
That's cool to know.
Our older people.
So give us some, I guess in broad strokes, dietary, guidelines to optimize for this fatty acid in our diets, and then I guess more broadly to optimize around cell membrane stability.
Right. So my preference based upon the data is the best source of C15 in food, if you can eat it, is cheese. And it's
Pecorino.
hard cheeses, pecorino, because you're more likely to get that concentrated. It's like C15 is meant for things to be hardy and survive. Even the Sardinians, because they've been throughout history have been challenged with times of drought and lack of food, and their baseline food supply is based upon doomsday. So all their foods can last without refrigeration, so C15 is really good in those environments. And so it's these hard cheeses are your best source of C15. I have cheese as snacks every day.
Wow.
I have I'm not going to name the brand, but I have a whole grain. So I get my fiber cracker that has 3 ingredients in it and isn't processed. I have that. To get my inulin and get my microbes making C15. I exercise. If you exercise, you can increase your C15 levels as long as you have C15 in storage, because it releases C15 that's in your tissues, right? So otherwise I would never exercise. I'm just kidding. But it's another good reason to exercise. And then I take Fatty 15. And I think it's because of that combination. I also drink flat whites, so I'm not afraid of milk in my coffees. I have 2 coffees a day, and with all of that, I'm Sardinian, so I have 0.46 levels is the 3rd highest C15 levels.
I want to get my levels tested.
We can get your levels tested.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yeah. What about Parmesan cheese?
Parmesan cheese should be good. Let me think through the list. Parmesan cheese would be good. Once you start getting to Pecorino's the best. And then you start getting to the Swiss. And again, you kind of feel like these are harder cheese. The harder the cheese, it seems like the more the C15 in them. So Parmesan's a good one. And then you get to the cream cheeses and sour cream, and it still has C15 in them, and better than like low-fat milk. But you could kind of almost go by the toughness.
Yeah.
How long can you leave it out of the fridge?
Well, also there's like these fantastic Parmesan crisps that are super high in protein.
Yeah, so that could be another source from
Yeah,
here.
I love Parmesan because it's like the protein shake of the cheese world. It's
Yeah.
like on a per calorie basis, it's got the highest proportion of protein.
You know, I bet it's going to have high C15 because the more I'm thinking about it, I always think of it as it's Parmesan's already shaved, right? And
I have a block of
right.
Parmesan in my
Yeah,
fridge
yeah,
right
it's
now.
the block,
Yeah.
and the block is it's a hard cheese. Yeah,
Wow.
it's going to have high C15 in it.
You're making a lot of my listeners really happy right now
Well, that's so
because
great.
cheese is one of these, and it's also the top source of. I mean, it is the top source of saturated fat in the standard American diet, which is, people are eating typically a lot of cheese, but along with that, they tend to be eating a lot of other junk.
Yeah, don't get your cheese by eating pizza.
Yeah,
Right. So it's really this pure cheese, like whole, pure, clean food. You might know something about that.
pure Whole Foods. Whole Foods, yeah.
I don't know, you might have a
Yes.
book on it or something like
Might have
that.
written a book or two. Well, super interesting. This is a conversation that I wanted to have because I've seen your guys' marketing, and I've heard of C15. There was a study that came out a couple years ago where it's considered a biomarker of dairy consumption too, is
Yeah.
it not?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so there was like they were looking at it as a biomarker of dairy consumption and then associating it with like certain health outcomes.
Dairy fat. Yeah, like it's like, oh, therefore eat dairy products.
Yeah, and I remember in that observational study, I mean, it seemed to be really beneficial.
Yeah. So now we know it's like, oh, it was just perspective, right? It was sitting there all along. It was just saying, oh, it's a biomarker of dairy fat, therefore eat dairy fat. There's something good in dairy. Literally, it would say, therefore, there's something good in dairy fat that's causing these. I was like, no, it's the marker. It's CFA. So we were the first to be like, maybe it's not just a biomarker of health because we were getting it, in the dolphins. It wasn't dairy fat. It was fish. So you have a whole different source for them. And so that enabled us to kind of not have the blinders on and just be like, well, let's just see if C15 is active.
Wouldn't it also be present in meat as well if it's like in grass-fed? If it's in grass-fed milk, I would assume that it would also be like in the meat.
Yep.
Like if we accumulate it in our cells, then eating, the meat from mammals, I would presume would also be a source.
That was a nice series of logic there.
Is it am I wrong?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's the fat in ruminant meat. So it needs to be ruminants for the most part. So these are animals that have rumens. So and that which we drink their milk is kind of a good way of putting like goats, sheep, cows. Interestingly, the closest relative for dolphins are cows. And are ruminants. So they're artiodactyls is the group. So they're like cows of the sea.
Wow.
Yeah. So this really interesting. So with regard to meat, the fat in the meat of these animals have the highest C15, and then even within there, like a study that looked at different types of meat fat, and it showed Australian lamb had the highest C15, grass-fed.
Wow.
And again, we're getting back to that whole, just like you were saying.
Yeah. Well, it's making me feel a lot better about my 100% grass-fed Wagyu beef that I have in my freezer.
Yeah.
That's super fatty, super delicious. But
practically a vegetable.
there's always like the question of like how much animal fat should I be eating? Like a properly raised animal is pretty lean actually, and wild game is pretty lean. So
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, knowing that there is this fat, in the fat of properly raised ruminant animals makes me feel a little bit better about that. It's not just like, empty calories.
Exactly. There's it can help us go back. It's like, again, how can we fix where we were before we had increased prevalence of chronic diseases in younger and younger people. It's when we had a world that was much richer in C15. So how do we get our food supply back to that and then not discourage it in children and infants, and then we can work from there. But it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
I know someone who talks to Congress about things like that.
I mean,
It's great.
so fun. So great. Well, yeah, thanks to you as well, scientists pushing this, the envelope forward and publishing research on it.
Well, thanks. It's been a journey.
Yeah, I mean, you've stumbled on something potentially, that is really cool and potentially has the capacity to do a lot of good for a lot of people. So,
Oh, thanks.
yeah,
Yeah.
thanks for doing what you do.
Simon and Schuster reached out last summer because we have a weekly blog where we share C15 science, like what's the latest. And they reached out last summer and they said, hey, this is a great story because we did a TED Talk a few years ago
Cool.
on the origin, so that's fun. And then Simon Schuster said, you should write a book. Like, this is a great story, like a science story. And so wrote that. And so it's on pre-sale, but it'll come out in March 2025, right before National Dolphin Day.
Dope.
Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.